Well, greetings, vinyl community. I'm back after a little break and wanted to do a video because Bill at the Vinylverse, I had mentioned to him having some 45s by Simon Dupree and the Big Sound, the precursor band to Gentle Giant, and he asked to see those. So I'm going to show them and then we'll do a flip through the Gentle Giant discography. So Simon Dupree and the Big Sound was a 60s band that was formed by the brothers Phil Shulman, Derek Shulman, who were born in Glasgow, and their younger brother Ray Shulman, who was born after the family moved down to Portsmouth in England. And they were one of the quintessential one-hit wonders, I think. They had a longish career, starting with the beat boom and going through the end of the 60s, but only had one really big hit, and that was this song, Kites. Music to Kites was written by Lee Pockris, who was also responsible for Catch a Falling Star and Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini. And I'd love to hear Gentle Giant do a cover of that one. This is a Dutch edition of the 45 Kites. Very psychedelic song. They were not completely convinced of their psychedelic identity, but this was following the Summer of Love when they sort of abandoned their R&B roots and did this very string-laden, nocturnal sounding, bogus orientalia piece, very sort of moody and mysterious with unfathomable and inscrutable mysterious oriental language, which is provided by the guest actress Jackie Chan, who is Jackie with a Q, not to be confused with the martial arts guy. When they brought her into the session, they discovered that she couldn't actually speak Chinese. She was born in Trinidad. So they got somebody from a local Chinese restaurant to write something out, and she delivered the words, whatever he wrote out, phonetically. And that's what you hear on the record. Was a top 10 hit around Christmas time of 1967 in the UK. And as they became sort of pop stars in the wake of that hit, lead singer Derek Shulman necessarily became identified with the name Simon Dupree. He wasn't supposed to be Simon Dupree, that was just a hip band name, they thought. And Dupree is apparently an important name in the Portsmouth area, so it was kind of knowing which side your bread is buttered for them to use that name. This one doesn't even mention the Big Sound on the cover. This is a Norwegian version of the same single. As I mentioned, it was not written by the band. They did not write most of their own material. A large proportion of their catalog was written by the Shulman's sister, Evelyn King, not to be confused with Evelyn Champagne King. She was married to John King, who was the band's manager, and she wrote a great many of their songs. Actually, their first single was a cover of a Five Americans song, I See the Light. I Saw the Light. Here's the American version of the Kites single, promo version on the Tower label. Like the Sun, Like the Fire was the B-side, and that is one of the Evelyn King and Paul Smith co-writes. And before leaving Kites behind, there's a latter-day EP, I think this is from the 70s or early 80s, on EMI. Kites, For Whom the Bell Tolls, another Eve King and Paul Smith composition, I See the Light, and Reservations by Albert Hammond. Again, later one, Thinking About My Life. This one is an original. It's unclear to me just who wrote it, though, because it's just credited to Shulman. And there are 3 Shulmans in the band. So I'm not sure whether it was Phil, Derek, or Ray who wrote that. But it does feature some keyboard work by their session pianist, who was a young fellow named Reginald Dwight, and they laughed at the stage name he was planning to adopt for the album he was about to record, Elton John. Oh, this was, what is this? This is a Swedish copy. And here is the same coupling in a Dutch edition. And finally, for the 45s, a German edition of Broken Hearted Pirates. You'll see Derek Shulman hamming it up in front, being the front man. And this really leaves the blues and R&B roots completely behind. It's just a zany sort of theatrical music hall bit of wackiness. Definitely not something that I think they were really, really proud of in retrospect. Fun to listen to, and this copy previously belonged to one Rainer Glinka. So that's it as far as the Simon Dupree records. I used to have the US version of their LP. I don't have that anymore, but I can I don't have this single, but I can show you sheet music for one of their late singles, The Eagle Flies Tonight. And there you go. If you want to learn to play a Simon Dupree song, I wouldn't let you down. So upon the demise of Simon Dupree and the Big Sound, the three Shulman brothers and the latter-day drummer, Martin Smith, went on to form Gentle Giant after hooking up with the keyboardist, Kerry Minier, and guitarist Gary Green. And this is their first album. This is on the Vertigo label. It's not a swirl copy. I've got the Spaceship Edition. This is my original copy from the mid-70s, I think. It took me a little while to find this. Bit of a story about the band, along with the lyrics on the inner spread. And there is that Spaceship label. The artwork by George Underwood became the Gentle Giant logo, which followed them throughout their career. Second album, Acquiring the Taste, another Gatefold production. I've actually shown this album before on, I think it was the Vinyl Tag, asking for tasteless album covers. This is both tasteless in design and concept and tasteful in title. This has a nice little manifesto for the band written on the inside. Acquiring the taste is the second phase of sensory pleasure. If you've gorged yourself on our first album, then relish the finer flavors, we hope, of this, our second offering. It is our goal to expand the frontiers of contemporary popular music at the risk of being very unpopular. We've recorded each composition with the one thought, that it should be unique, adventurous, and fascinating. It has taken every shred of our combined musical and technical knowledge to achieve this. From the outset, we have abandoned all preconceived thoughts on blatant commercialism. Instead, we hope to give you something far more substantial and fulfilling. All you need to do is sit back and acquire the taste. And for some reason, this band got a rap for being pretentious. But this is a great album. Big step up from the first album, which was a very fine album in its own right, but still baby steps. It was still a band that hadn't really found its sound. On this one, they really did go all out, and in particular did a lot of the instrumental switching around. There are probably about 24 different instruments played by the 6 band members on this album. Gentle Giant's third album, released in 1972, Three Friends. The band changed drummers. Malcolm Mortimer plays on this one, replacing Martin Smith. This is the only album Malcolm Mortimer is on. This is a concept album with a very simple concept. It's about three school chums who grow up and take completely different paths in life. One is working class, one becomes a successful gentleman, and one becomes an artist. And so you get the idea. You have little cartoons of the storyline. You can't have a prog concept album without a comic strip inside. It's like, Tarkus and all that. And this is the British edition. The American edition used the same cover art as the first album, which had not been released in America. And that was something that caused a lot of confusion later on. Fantastic album. Malcolm Mortimer was replaced by John Weathers for the fourth album, Octopus. And John Weathers remained with the band for the rest of their career. Fourth album, and the title Octopus is supposedly meant to suggest that this is an opus made up of 8 songs. This is the British edition with the spectacular Roger Dean artwork. Very flashy. Released in the USA with this cover. And you'll notice it's die cut, but the inner sleeve is not, so it sticks out the sides, which is what that blue stuff is. And the lyrics printed. If you held my feet to the fire, this is my favorite Gentle Giant album. It has close competition with Three Friends, and also Interview. I love Interview. Power and the Glory, they're all great. Previous Gentle Giant albums had included references to the works of the 16th century French author François Rabelais, whose works were very satirical, very scatological. I have here my original copy of Gargantua and Pantagruel from college, and I also have a French edition with some amusing illustrations. We see the view from inside Gargantua's mouth. The first album had included a reference to Rabelais in the liner notes, the little story about the band being discovered by a giant. Second album had included a song titled Pantagruel's Nativity, and Octopus opens with another song mentioning a character from Gargantua and Pantagruel's saga, The Advent of Panurge. And it does include specific references to the story of how Gargantua and Pantagruel met Panurge. It's not the only literary reference on the album. It makes references to R.D. Lang. It makes references to Camus. So I don't know why these guys get typed as pretentious. It's not pretentious to make literary references. But it's not hugely rock and roll. And they were at heart a rock and roll band. I think they'd be the first to insist on that. Follow-up album, another that was not released initially in America. This was on the WWA label in the UK, In a Glass House. The oldest Shulman brother, Phil, left the band after Octopus, so this was their first album as a 5-piece, and this was the lineup that was stable for the rest of their career. Unusual cover with an insert behind this cellophane window showing different poses of the band members, and lyrics printed on an inner sleeve. Right, sixth album, The Power and the Glory, is another conceptual album about political power. The cover art suggests royalty and something from the past, but in 1974 it was really hard to resist the idea that this was about Richard Nixon. They were a British band that toured America a lot. I'm not sure how much Richard Nixon would have been on their minds, but coming as it did during the death spiral of Nixon's presidency, that was a very easy connection to make. Again, wonderful songs with the typical complexity of Gentle Giant's music. A lot of very colorful instrumental interplay, and as pretty much always, a couple of achingly gorgeous ballads. Kerry Minier did the vocals on some of their sweetest tunes. He never did much singing on stage, because his voice was soft, but in the studio he could do those wonderful melodies. And this is Sideways cover. It's like that. Several Gentle Giant albums will sit in your album collection sideways. This one, the first two, they're all like that. Next, from 1975, Free Hand. Interesting thing about the cover art, if you compare the US and the UK editions of the album, the overall design is the same, but it's not the same image. The hand is in just a different position on the two covers. This is the album where they brought out a little more funk, particularly in the keyboards. They had that funky clavinet sound, and as complex and intellectual as their music was, that was an interesting link, a grounding. And they always had that grounding, particularly since bringing John Weathers into the band to be the rhythmic backbone, because as rhythmically intricate as Gentle Giant's music was, and it got very complex, a lot of interlocking parts, John Weathers could always be relied upon to supply the most basic backbeat at the heart of it all. From 1976, Interview. Another conceptual album, this time sort of a well-worn idea, the trials and tribulations of being in a rock band on the road, away from home, in strange cities. So there's the inner sleeve. This is on Capitol, as the previous album had been. Their previous US releases had been on Columbia. The Power and the Glory, I guess, was the first one on Capitol. Oh, and I haven't been showing you the singles from the Three Friends era. Prologue, opening track. This is a promo-only release with Working All Day and Three Friends on the B-side. From the Power and the Glory era, the single The Power and the Glory, this is not a song from the album. This is a song that was made specifically to comply with record label demands that they do something more commercial for a single release. So they, as they tell it, they came up with 3 songs and the record company approved the worst one. I think it's a great song myself. B-side is a song from the Power and the Glory album, Playing the Game. And from the album I just saw, Interview, Give It Back. Nice little pseudo-reggae number with interesting little ping sounds throughout. Backed with Empty City, that Gentle Giant logo that is ever present in the band's career. And their next album, from 1977, was a live set, the official live Gentle Giant, Playing the Fool. And the title was taken from a bootleg LP that was released before Gentle Giant was able to release any of their own live music, so they co-opted the title that the bootleggers gave. This was recorded live on their European tour in 1976, and it demonstrates that not only could they reproduce their very intricate music on stage, but they could elaborate upon it and make arrangements that are completely different but no less complex than the original arrangements. They were a great band on stage. I got to see them 3 times. First in 1975, around the time of the Freehand album. Later in 1976, when they were 4th on the bill at a big stadium concert supporting Yes, also with Peter Frampton and Gary Wright on the bill. They only played a half-hour set, a little more than that, and their new album at the time was Interview, but they played not a single song from it. The last time was in 1977, not exactly in support of their next album, because this album still was a few months in the future. However, at the concert they played all of the side 2 songs from this album, and it is a split album. Side 1 shows them taking a decidedly more stripped down direction. They're toning down the complexity of their music conspicuously and including one song, Bet You Thought We Couldn't Do It, which was their nod to punk rock, this being 1977 after all. The Missing Piece, this did have a puzzle, I believe, that was made as a promotional item. Don't have a copy of that to show you. Missing Piece on the inner sleeve. No lyrics, just greenness. It's a very green album. If you belong to the Green Party, this is the Gentle Giant album for you. Side 2 was not exactly like their older material, but it was a bit more rarefied, a bit more complex. A very nice poppy song, As Old as You're Young, but still having the Gentle Giant DNA from earlier days, and a nice, long, stretched-out ballad, Memories of Old Days, where on stage you would have all 5 members of the band playing various types of guitar. So that was it. There were 5 guitarists on stage playing 6-string electric, playing 12-string acoustic, bass, all different guitars. In keeping with the more commercial direction that they adopted with The Missing Piece, they released Gentle Giant released a single, I'm Turning Around, which was taken from the album and heavily promoted with releases in various territories. This is the original British edition. The B-side, strangely enough, is a track from 2 albums earlier, from Freehand, Just the Same, one of the kind of funk-laced songs from that album. Here is a Dutch edition of the same single. For some reason on the sleeve they change I'm Turning Around to simply Turn Around. A German edition of the same. And in Spain, they translated the title into Dando Vueltas and replaced the B-side with a track from the album that mentioned Spain. In fact, it's the opening track from the album, 2 Weeks in Spain. And of course, the album was released in the good old USA, both as a promo edition with mono and stereo versions of the A-side, and a regular stock pressing with a different B-side. This time they went even farther back in the band's history and included a B-side taken from The Power and the Glory, Cogs in Cogs. Don't ask me why. That's the vagaries of record company etiquette. So that more streamlined and commercial direction that they were taking went a bit too far on the next album, Giant for a Day. This is their least finest hour. Not entirely a disaster, but just has very little of what made Gentle Giant special. Yes, and they had a little mask that you could cut out, just in case you're 10 years old and a Gentle Giant fan. Again, they had singles. Thank You was the single. A bit of another reggae-laced piece. Spooky Boogie, instrumental, was the B-side. One of the best tracks on the album. I think the best 2 tracks on that album were the ones that are actually least characteristic of Gentle Giant. So they carry the least whiff of expectation. You wonder, why doesn't this sound as good as the material that was on The Power and the Glory or Octopus? One of them was John Weather's only composition for the band, Friends, which is just this jolly little acoustic picking, sort of Paul McCartney-ish song, and it's really delightful. And the other is Spooky Boogie, the B-side of Thank You. In America, and this is a German copy, but in America, they released Spooky Boogie as an A-side on this promotional orange disc. And this was part of a promotional, a promo kit that I won at the time through a contest, a sweepstakes in Trouser Press magazine. The theme was Halloween, so they had their pumpkin orange disc. There was a trick-or-treat bag, which was printed with the title Little Brown Bag, another song title from the album. A mask, based on the album cover, which actually is hanging over there. I need to get it. I'm going to edit this out. There we go. And there's the Little Brown Bag. You know, they told us that we need to wear masks on the street. I don't know why I get such strange looks when I go out with this on, but, you know, I'm just following directions. So yeah, that was part of the promo kit. The pumpkin orange disc, the Halloween bag, the Halloween mask, some little promo sheets, and an actual orange Gentle Giant lollipop. I saved that for years, but eventually the ants got it. And one more edition of Thank You. Oh, no, that's the British copy. This is the other British single, No Stranger and Words from the Wise. So that was almost it for Gentle Giant. That was their 1978 release. And it all came to an end in 1980 with their final album, Civilian, which very cleverly fits the title Civilian into the lettering of the word Gentle Giant. And this was another change in direction. to a more new wave kind of sound. And it was actually, while it didn't sound at all like the Gentle Giant of old, I think it was musically a lot more successful and a lot more enjoyable than the previous album. So they went out on a kind of different note, but not a bad one. Forgot to show the single from the Civilian album, All Through the Night, backed with Convenience, Clean and Easy. This is a German pressing.